My husband lied to me and sided with my sister because I couldn't have a baby. But then I got pregnant. Now, he's mad that I still want to divorce him. Growing up, my older sister Nicole and I shared an inseparable bond. She wasn't just a sibling. She was my confidant and best friend. From my earliest memories of toddling around, Nicole was the one I turned to with all my queries and fears, encouraged by our parents who fostered a close-knit relationship between us. Nicole radiated a warmth that was almost palpable, characterized by her endless patience and kindness. Whether I needed a comforting embrace or a soothing word, she was my constant source of support. Our childhood was filled with countless hours spent constructing forts, playing with Barbies, and diving deep into our imaginations. Every night, Nicole would read to me until I drifted off to sleep, her voice a comforting lullaby. When school began for me, the transition was challenging. I remember clinging to my parents, tearfully pleading not to be left alone. Nicole, already accustomed to the school environment being a few grades ahead, promised to keep an eye on me. She stayed true to her promise, always making time to check on me during her lunch breaks. Knowing she was there made my school days less daunting. After school, Nicole transformed into my personal tutor, helping me navigate through math problems and craft narratives for English class. Her guidance was unwavering, always making me feel intelligent and capable. In hindsight, our parents, perhaps unintentionally, placed a heavy responsibility on Nicole to care for me, which might have shaped our relationship differently under other circumstances. As a child, whenever I encountered a problem, I instinctively sought Nicole's advice over our mother's, confident in her understanding of my needs. Regrettably, I was too young to realize the extent of the struggles Nicole faced with her own mental health. With no one to lean on herself, she bore her burdens alone. Our parents, despite their full-time jobs that kept them away from home for long hours, did their utmost to provide for us, striving to maintain a stable home and fulfill our desires, even amidst financial strains. However, I can't help but feel Nicole was somewhat overlooked. I wish they could have offered her the same level of attention and love she so freely gave to me. One day, I stumbled upon a distressing scene in Nicole's room. She was cutting herself on her thighs. The shock in her eyes when she saw me was palpable, but I pretended not to notice, unwilling to confront her about it. At the time, I naively dismissed her actions as a bizarre teenage whim, unaware of the serious implications. As Nicole neared the end of high school, her challenges escalated into a severe drug problem. Her academic performance plummeted, prompting frequent calls from the principal about her aggressive behavior, either from starting fights or disrespecting teachers. Our father, the stricter of our parents, often responded with lengthy lectures or stern punishments, like removing her bedroom door in an attempt to discipline her. Nicole's retorts about hating school and dismissing everyone as stupid were met with our mother's futile attempts to soothe her. The constant arguments reverberated throughout our home, disrupting any sense of peace. I often retreated to my room, trying to shut out the relentless tension that hung over our family. Over time, Nicole's behavior deteriorated further, culminating in her attempt to run away with a troubled boyfriend. That night, we discovered her goodbye letter on the dining table, a venomous outpouring of resentment towards our parents, and a declaration of her plans to start anew. The anguish in my mother's cries as she clutched the letter was heartbreaking. My father, his hands trembling, dialed 911, his voice cracking as he reported Nicole's disappearance. After what felt like an agonizing wait filled with uncertainty, the police found Nicole in a rundown motel. She was with her boyfriend, who was implicated in a drug ring. He was arrested, but Nicole was allowed to return home, having convinced the authorities she was unaware of his illegal activities. This incident marked a significant turning point in our family's struggles. I harbored a faint hope that this ordeal would make Nicole realize how deeply our parents cared for her and how terrified they had been during her disappearance. I yearned for our family to return to its former peace. I wanted to embrace her, but instead of expressing gratitude for being rescued from peril, Nicole lashed out. She accused our parents of controlling her life and blamed them for her boyfriend's arrest. Her expression was distorted by rage, her eyes barely recognizable, wild with fury. Nicole was evidently still under the influence of drugs, her behavior erratic and detached from reality. My father, attempting to maintain composure but clearly shaken, told her firmly, "Nicole, we love you, but this can't continue. You need professional help." Beside him, my mother tearfully nodded, her hand clenching ours for support. Nicole's response was vehement. "Help? You think I need help? It's you who need it," she yelled, flailing her arms dramatically. "I'm not your prisoner. You can't control me." At that point, our parents revealed their plans for her rehabilitation, hoping it would be a step toward recovery. This news only intensified her fury. Nicole screamed louder and began hurling objects around, indifferent to whether they struck us. She threatened dire consequences if we forced her into rehab, including harming herself. Despite her threats, our parents stood firm. My mother insisted that as a minor, it was their duty to intervene and prevent her from spiraling further. That night, my father had to lock her in her room to prevent further damage and ensure her safety. Witnessing the devastating impact of drugs on my sister was profoundly distressing. The subsequent days were consumed with a flurry of activity, securing a spot in the rehab center, completing necessary paperwork, and managing Nicole's volatile emotions, which fluctuated wildly between anger and despair. The day Nicole left for rehab remains etched in my memory as one of the toughest days I've ever faced. I watched, heart sinking, as my parents escorted her from the house, her gaze swirling with anger and a profound sense of defeat. Despite the pain, I understood that this intervention was crucial, perhaps the only way to save her from her destructive path. I rushed to her, yearning for a farewell embrace, but she shoved me aside harshly and spat at me. This shocking display of hostility was new. Nicole had never before directed such visceral anger towards me. My mother comforted me, urging me not to take the hurtful action to heart, explaining that Nicole was in deep pain. Over the ensuing weeks, I clung to the hope of Nicole's recovery, envisioning her return, restored and rejuvenated. 2 months later, Nicole emerged from rehab visibly healthier. Her face, once hollow, now bore a soft fullness, and a gentle flush painted her cheeks. As our family gathered to welcome her back, my mother's eyes brimmed with tears of relief, enveloping Nicole in a tender embrace, while my father offered a supportive squeeze on her shoulder. I attempted to hug her too, but she brushed me off, leaving me to step back awkwardly, at a loss for words. Despite the cold reception, my heart swelled at her presence. I had missed her deeply. During the drive home, my mother repeatedly expressed our collective joy at having Nicole back, noting that we had kept her room pristine, just the way she liked it. My father had thoughtfully picked up Nicole's favorite candies and cookies, while I had crafted a heartfelt card expressing my longing during her absence and my joy at her return. Dishearteningly, Nicole scarcely acknowledged the card. Caught up in tending to her, my parents didn't immediately catch on to her distant attitude towards me. The following days were fraught with tension. Nicole secluded herself in her room, avoiding me whenever possible in shared spaces like the kitchen or living room. I tried to respect her need for space, hoping she was merely adjusting, but it became apparent that our relationship had altered fundamentally. Each attempt I made to engage her in light conversation was met with sharp retorts, her eyes flashing with resentment. "What do you want?" Nicole would snap, her voice cutting through the silence with a chilly sharpness. "Can't you just leave me alone?" One evening, seizing the opportunity while our parents were out, I approached her room, hoping to break through the barriers between us. I gently knocked, my voice tentative. "Nicole, can I come in? I just want to talk." Her response was a harsh shout from behind the door. "Go away! I don't ever want to see your stupid face." I lingered in the hallway, struck by her harsh words, bewildered by her intense aversion to me when I had done nothing to warrant such disdain. I longed for the sister who was once my closest ally, who helped with my homework and shared whispered secrets in the dead of night. Now, she felt like a stranger. Our parents attempted to intervene, but their involvement only seemed to exacerbate the situation. When they inquired about her resentment towards me, Nicole exploded, shouting that she wished she had remained an only child, and even uttered the heartbreaking wish that I had never been born. Hearing such words shattered me. Nicole had always been my role model, my hero. To hear her express such a cruel desire was devastating, and it became clear this wasn't just a momentary outburst of anger, it was a deep-seated wish. Dinner times, once vibrant with conversation and laughter, had turned into tense, silent ordeals. Nicole would glare at me or mockingly comment on my stories about friends or school achievements, taunting me as a loser or calling me a nerd, questioning why I even had friends. Our parents tried to silence her snide remarks, but the damage was done. I would sit quietly, barely touching my food, fighting back tears and wondering what I could have possibly done to earn such scorn. Nicole's transformation was a profound source of sorrow. She seemed consumed by pain and anger, and no matter how much I missed our bond, every attempt to mend it was met with hostility and outright rejection. Nicole's animosity towards me escalated dangerously. She even began to devise methods to endanger my life. Given my severe peanut allergy, a condition well known within our family, our parents had always taken great care to keep peanuts out of our home. However, one evening, Nicole prepared a chicken salad for dinner. Initially, I didn't suspect anything amiss as I began eating with my family. After a few bites, though, a sudden unease washed over me. My mother, inspecting her plate more closely, discovered tiny bits of chopped peanuts mixed into the salad. Her reaction was immediate and alarmed. "Nicole, did you use peanuts in this?" she demanded, knowing full well my allergy. By then, my symptoms had begun to intensify alarmingly. My throat felt constricted, and breathing became increasingly difficult. Clutching my neck, I struggled for air, panic overtaking me. My mother leaped up, rushing to my aid. "Nicole, how could you?" she cried out, her voice a harrowing blend of fear and anger. Nicole's response was chillingly apathetic. "It's not a big deal. She's probably faking it," Nicole retorted dismissively. Meanwhile, my father wasted no time. He retrieved my EpiPen from the kitchen and administered the injection swiftly. As he did, my mother dialed 911, her voice shaking as she described the emergency. Those moments before the ambulance arrived stretched into what felt like an eternity. Drained of strength, I lay on the floor, each breath a monumental effort, engulfed by feelings of betrayal and sorrow. The sister who once looked out for me had now recklessly endangered my life. Thankfully, the paramedics arrived swiftly and transported me to the hospital. The journey was a haze of sirens and urgent voices. At the hospital, doctors quickly intervened to stabilize my condition. Gradually, my breathing normalized. Later that night, as I rested in my hospital bed, weary and subdued, my parents remained at my bedside, their expressions laden with concern and regret. "We're so sorry, honey," my mother whispered, her tears reflecting the light of the room. "We'll ensure this never happens again," my mother assured me, tears in her eyes. My father nodded in agreement, his face set in a grim line. "Nicole will have to face the consequences of her actions. We can't overlook this." I don't remember the exact measures my parents took to discipline Nicole for endangering my life, but in hindsight, any punishment seemed inadequate for the gravity of her betrayal. The ordeal left me deeply unsettled. My trust in Nicole was irreparably broken, and I no longer felt safe in my own home. Increasingly, I confined myself to my room, seeking refuge from her presence. Despite our parents' efforts to get Nicole into therapy, she managed to charm and manipulate the therapists, convincing them that her actions were simply a misguided mistake. Therapists reassured my parents there was nothing fundamentally wrong with Nicole, downplaying the severity of her actions as trivial. These reassurances only widened the rift between us, especially as Nicole continued to withhold any apology for her life-threatening behavior. It became apparent she was manipulating everyone around her. My anxiety around eating escalated to the point where I would often skip meals, fearing Nicole might tamper with my food again. This fear began to take a toll on my health. Observing my distress, my mother devised a plan to help alleviate my fears. She purchased a small, lockable refrigerator for my room. "Keep your snacks in here," she suggested, ensuring it was a place safe from Nicole's reach. This thoughtful gesture became my lifeline. Having a secure place for my food restored a sense of control over my well-being and significantly reduced my anxiety. Thanks to my mother's empathy and intervention, I was able to maintain my health without succumbing to the overwhelming stress. Reflecting on those days, I realized just how perilously close I was to developing an eating disorder, all due to the anxiety induced by Nicole's menacing actions. Thanks to my mother's timely intervention, I avoided developing further health issues. Leaving for college after high school graduation opened a new chapter in my life, one where I could live without the constant fear of Nicole's hostility. The independence and opportunities available at college felt liberating, a stark contrast to the oppressive environment at home. Being away from Nicole, I could focus on my academic and personal development without the looming shadow of fear. I thrived in the new environment, embracing new experiences, forging supportive friendships, and engaging passionately in my interests. For the first time in years, I felt free to discover and express my true self without worry. During this transformative period, I met Keith, who would eventually become my husband. Our friendship blossomed over shared academic goals and a mutual love for anime, creating a strong bond that naturally evolved into a romantic relationship. Keith's understanding and acceptance provided a profound sense of connection. We spent hours engrossed in discussions about our favorite anime shows, dissecting characters and narratives, and supporting each other through our college challenges. Keith's kindness, intelligence, and humor drew me closer to him, and it wasn't long before we fell deeply in love. When the time came for our wedding, despite my reservations, I agreed to invite Nicole at our parents' insistence. They believed she had changed. Nicole had taken a different path. She hadn't pursued higher education and was still financially dependent on our parents, working only part-time as a cashier. Despite our parents' hopes, Nicole's interactions with me during college breaks remained fraught with conflict and disrespect. I hoped that inviting her to the wedding would provide an opportunity for peace and perhaps some reconciliation on this significant day. Unfortunately, Nicole's actions at the wedding only confirmed my apprehensions. Nicole's choice to wear a white dress to my wedding was clearly a provocative act meant to detract from my special day. I was deeply hurt by her obvious intention to overshadow my happiness, and even my husband and his family were stunned by her boldness. It seemed like yet another of Nicole's calculated attempts to undermine me. Thankfully, my father handled the situation with firm resolve. He promptly escorted Nicole out of the venue amidst her protests and warned her of severe consequences if she tried to disrupt the ceremony further. Later, both he and my mother apologized for not heeding my initial reservations about inviting her, acknowledging their oversight. Despite this incident, the rest of my wedding day unfolded beautifully, and I chose not to harbor resentment towards my parents for long. Over the past 3 years, Keith and I have built a wonderful life together, complete with successful careers and a home of our own. Initially, our marriage was filled with romantic evenings and a fulfilling intimacy, but we soon faced the challenge of infertility. The shared dream of starting a family led us to undergo numerous medical tests, yet no clear issues were identified. The doctors advised us to keep trying, and while I maintained a hopeful outlook, trusting that it would happen when the time was right, Keith adopted a more proactive approach. He began obsessively researching potential fertility issues and frequently suggested new diets to enhance our chances of conception. This relentless pursuit of a solution began to overwhelm me. While I understood Keith's desire for answers, the constant pressure to adapt my lifestyle and diet based on the latest findings became a source of stress. Whenever I attempted to discuss my feelings, Keith's frustration would boil over. He would accuse me of not trying hard enough to become a parent, often comparing me to his mother, who had effortlessly conceived 3 children. Keith's harsh words and erratic behavior began to strain our relationship, marking the start of our growing disconnect. On 2 separate instances, I caught him cheating with women he met at bars. Each time, he pleaded for forgiveness, declaring his love and his commitment to starting a family with me. However, his remorse would soon give way to manipulation, blaming me for his indiscretions by claiming I drove him to seek affection elsewhere. This recurring pattern of betrayal and gaslighting made me realize the unsustainable nature of our marriage. I could no longer live in a cycle of doubt and false hope. Gradually, I began to emotionally withdraw from our relationship. Last week, I opened up to my best friend about the turmoil I was experiencing. I had previously been too embarrassed to share, but she listened empathetically, affirming that my feelings were justified and urging me to prioritize my well-being, even if it meant leaving Keith. The night I decided to confront Keith, he didn't come home. After several ignored calls, driven by a mix of anger and desperation, I went to his usual hangout spot. The sight that greeted me there was devastating. Keith and my sister Nicole, intimately together, laughing and kissing in a secluded booth. The betrayal by both my husband and my sister felt like a brutal blow. Overwhelmed and heartbroken, I snapped a few photos as evidence of their affair and left the bar in tears. I packed my belongings that same night and drove to my parents' house. Collapsing into my mother's arms, I poured out the painful details. My parents were shocked and outraged, especially upon seeing the photos. My father, furious, immediately phoned Nicole, demanding she return home to confront the situation. I suspect Nicole had anticipated my father's fury from his tone on the phone, yet she still brazenly showed up at our parents' house with Keith in tow. What unfolded next was tumultuous. My father, in a display of indignation, threw Nicole's belongings out as she and Keith tried to justify their relationship, claiming they were better suited for each other and deserved a chance. My mother's patience snapped. She physically ushered them out and forbade Nicole from returning. Since that confrontation, Keith has bombarded me with calls and messages, attempting to plead his case and lamenting Nicole's distress over being ostracized by our family. He even accused me of precipitating these events by involving our parents without prior discussion, effectively blaming me for Nicole's predicament and their severed ties. Amidst this upheaval, my father and his friends supported me in moving back to my childhood home. The transition back has been surreal, a stark contrast to my previous life. Meanwhile, Nicole has moved in with Keith, continuing her attempts to reconnect with our parents, who remain disinterested in her explanations. Keith claims their relationship started from a chance meeting at a bar, where Nicole empathized with his struggles, providing comfort. Despite Keith being fully aware of Nicole's history of antagonism towards me, including her attempt to sabotage our wedding, it seems he gave little consideration to the consequences of their affair. Nicole's motivations are less ambiguous. Her long-standing resentment likely fueled her decision to pursue Keith as a means of asserting dominance over me. Their affair might have been thrilling for them, even exciting in its forbidden nature. Moving forward, I have scheduled a consultation with a divorce lawyer to discuss my options. On a different note, I've recently found out that I am pregnant, which adds a complex layer to this already complicated situation. The news of my pregnancy was bittersweet, something I had longed for, yet wished had come under different circumstances. My parents expressed deep concerns about the implications of this pregnancy, fearing it would permanently bind me to Keith. They advised against keeping the child, leaving me torn and uncertain about the path ahead. Amidst this turmoil, I informed Keith about the pregnancy. His immediate reaction was to propose halting the divorce and starting marriage counseling, asserting he would end things with Nicole immediately. His sudden shift struck me as absurd, and I couldn't help but dismiss his proposal with a laugh. I firmly told him that reconciliation was out of the question. Our relationship, if it continued, would be solely for co-parenting purposes. Keith's response was one of anger. Over the phone, he bitterly expressed regret that I hadn't become pregnant sooner, suggesting it might have influenced his choices between Nicole and me. His words only intensified my disgust and regret for involving him. In my next update, I'll share my decision regarding the pregnancy, but one thing is certain: my divorce from Keith is non-negotiable. Update 3. I am now officially divorced from Keith. The settlement awarded me substantial alimony, enabling me to secure a new residence. I am thankful for the steady support of my family and friends during this challenging period, and I'm pleased to report that my job is going well. Regarding the pregnancy, I ultimately decided not to go through with it. This decision was not made lightly. I was not mentally prepared to bring a child into such a fraught situation. I believe it was the best choice for both my well-being and that of the potential child, though it was a heart-wrenching decision. As for Nicole and Keith, their relationship ended shortly after my divorce. Following a severe argument, Keith evicted Nicole. She tried to return to our parents' home, but they denied her entry, and my father even threatened to call the police if she did not leave. From what I've heard, Nicole is now moving between friends' homes, trying to find her footing. I hope this experience prompts her to reflect and pursue a more positive direction in her life.